Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll call this January 21st Sammamish Planning Commission meeting to order virtually, as we are doing now for a while. Jackie, you want to read the accessibility notice?
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Baughman. Let me get my screen on here. Hold on just 1 second.
Oh, I forgot I'm supposed to have a joke ready for any of these delays.
Can you see our screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual Planning Commission meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment can be submitted. For non-agenda to view the meeting live, you can go to the city website, www.sammamish.us/TV21 or Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish. To view later, the meetings are usually available the day after the meeting on the city website or on the city YouTube channel and on Comcast Channel 21 as well. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. Let's start out with the roll call. I'll call each commissioner's name if you would unmute yourself so we can make sure your microphone works, and raise your hand and say here or present or whatever you prefer. That would be great. So Mark Baughman, I'm here. Ratuja Indipriere. Here. Mike Bresco. Here. Josh Amato. Here. Karthik Sitharman.
Yes.
And the illustrious Larry Crandall.
Hi, here.
Thank you. Okay, next is approval of the agenda for this evening. Anyone have any comments or corrections or objections to the agenda for this evening?
No.
No? Okay, so we'll call the agenda approved by common consent. Next is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting, which would have been December 17th. Anyone have any comments or corrections from the minutes from our last meeting on December 17th? I see some heads nodding no, so seeing no comments or corrections, we'll call the minutes from our last meeting approved by common consent. All right. Next, we have public comment for non-agenda items. Jackie, do we have anybody on the phone for, I see a caller, but do we have anybody on the phone for non-agenda public comment?
We do have a caller. I was just going to interrupt real quick. We did want to say a quick thank you this evening for one of our commissioners, Mr. Crandall. This is his last meeting with the city. And we did just want to have each person, if we could have each of our commissioners go around and say a couple words. I know we asked you guys to prepare something just quick. I don't know, Chair Baughman, if you wanted to start us off.
I sure can. I wrote this down so that I would get it right, so I am going to read it. I'm not going to be able to, wait a second, I'm going to rearrange this so I can see you, Larry, while I'm reading this.
Okay.
All right, so Larry, and to everyone, I just would like to say, you know, in the time that we're in, where there's a lot of suspicion and divisiveness at all levels of government, from national to local, it's truly been a pleasure to work alongside Larry Crandall, who always assumes the best of people, shows great leadership in his efforts to understand others' viewpoints, and with his humor adds joy to what can otherwise be, especially with me as the chair, an exceptionally dry exercise on the Planning Commission. Larry's warm, friendly approach makes it hard to consider him anything other than a friend to me personally, and a friend of the community that he's generously dedicated so much of his time. Larry, your presence will be missed by those of us who've worked with you on the Planning Commission. Thank you for all you've done to make our community a better place and to make our work a little bit lighter load. Best wishes for you as you move on to the next fun thing you're going to do.
Thank you.
How about Ratuja?
That's a tough act to follow, Mark. I just want to thank Larry for his leadership, for welcoming me onto the board and also into the community. I know many people forget Plahani is very new to Sammamish, so I know when I joined the commission, or even before that when I was involved, Larry has been extremely generous with imparting knowledge. And what I will say is that, Larry, you've been an inspiration for all of us who have watched you. You have given so many of us hope, and also so many of us love. And I've been extremely fortunate to visit your pea patch and consume a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. So I would love to keep doing that. And just, your discipline, your service, your teaching has been such an inspiration to all of us. And if I could do even 1% of what you have done so far, I would consider it's a big deal. So thank you for being our North Star.
Thank you.
Josh?
So thinking about Larry, one word that comes to mind quickly is kindness. And it's on the screen here, which it works. Larry's the first person to offer somebody kudos or congratulations, remember something about a staff member or planning commissioner or other member of the community. He very thoughtful, very kind, and we have big shoes to fill on the planning commission with Larry leaving. And he had brought in, he would bring in items from his garden, and I expressed to him that my wife and I were going to be working on our garden in the coming years, and asked him if he had any tips. And he quickly invited me over to his place to, like Ratuja, look at his pea patch and offer some advice. I'm very happy I got to know Larry, and I am very sad to see you go, but I very much appreciate all you've done for the city and how kind you've been to me as I joined the commission, so thank you.
Thank you.
Am I calling on somebody? Mike?
Well, I'll go next. So Larry, I actually feel very disappointed that I did not get to know you better. Both myself and Karthik joined, well, I think we had maybe one meeting in person, perhaps two. And you, I'm sure don't remember, but when I first showed up, you were the person who said, okay, here's what you need to do. And you gave me that kind of guidance and what to do and what to expect, and made me feel very welcomed. And now hearing about gardens and vegetables coming, I feel like we really missed out. But I would certainly echo, that first impression of somebody who is super kind, wanting to help others, extending that handout of welcoming. And when I saw a little bit more about your background and history and supporting Sammamish, I thought, wow, what an amazing individual who's devoted so much to public service and giving and helping others. So appreciate all that you've done and wish you luck as you move forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me go to the last one. So like Mike said, the COVID pandemic has robbed us of nice interactions with you over the years, Larry. But, your humor would be, that lightens up this boring proceedings that we go through and we're going to miss that. May I suggest that you call in for this public comment for 3 minutes and maybe lighten it up for us, once in a while, so that we continue to get your humor into this proceedings. We are going to miss you. Good luck with whatever you are planning to do. And thank you for all your service for the city and for sitting with us and helping us out as Mike and I kind of onboarded here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you all. It's been an honor
to serve. All I want to say, except on the apron, that silence of the yams. So, if you can read it, silence of the yams.
Of course.
Mark, we can't forget staff because, well, Larry, we are going to miss you. Even though it's been hard with City Hall being shut down and not being able to see you personally, you still call in, you check on us. I'm going to miss the weekly check-ins. We go way back to our days in parks, me as a project manager and you as a commissioner. And it's been a good run here at the city. Again, as I said, I'm going to miss the check-ins, and you've always been so kind and generous with staff, and expressing your kudos and your appreciation for us. We don't get that every day, and so when we hear it, it means the world. And so you better stay in touch. I expect weekly reports. Phone calls are always welcome, and when we get City Hall back up in order, we better see you around, especially at the farmers market.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I'll take a moment just to quickly say something, Larry. I would like to echo what Karthik and let me switch mics really quick. I would like to echo what Mike and Karthik were saying, that I wish I had more time overlapping with you here at the city, but I agree with Kelly. I think we need regular updates and check-ins with you, and I really, really appreciate how kind and thoughtful you are to all of us here at the city. So thank you, Larry, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks to everybody.
Everybody. Perfect. We'll go ahead.
Good.
I just wanted to say a quick thank you. I've already talked to Larry quite a bit today, so he knows what I have to say. But you'll be very missed, and I still expect my weekly regular phone calls, so that won't change. If we can, we'll go ahead and move on to non-agenda public comment. We do have 2 callers on the line, so give me just one moment. We'll go ahead and take Larry's photos away here. All right, I think I've got everybody's faces back on here. All right, and hopefully we should be seeing the non-agenda public comment screen. Oh. Sorry, everyone. We're having some screen switching issues. All right. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual Planning Commission meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment can be submitted. For verbal comment, up to 3 minutes of verbal public comment may be provided per person live during the meeting. In order to provide verbal public comment, you must call in. Call the following number and input the access code when prompted. The phone number is 1-872-240-3311, and the access code is 699-839-229. Once you have joined, you'll be placed on mute, and the meeting operator will unmute you when it's your turn to comment. You'll hear an automated voice say unmuted, and when that occurs, you can begin your comment, and please hang up when your comment is complete. We do have, it looks like, 2 callers on the line already, so I'll go ahead and unmute the first caller. And you will have 3 minutes to begin your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Mary Wichter, and I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish, Washington, and have been there 20 years. I wanted to talk during non-agenda public comments. The city allows people, anyone, to input once, well, you can do it any time during the year, but the first Monday in August, they have a cutoff. And if you want development regulations changed as text amendments, you can submit those. There is a process for doing that. They do it every year. I believe the city is actually required to do it. And I've done it a couple times for individually and also with other people. And 2 years ago, I'd done a joint docket with Mary Johnson. And when we did the docket requests, it turned out that some of her very important requests we didn't have to docket because they were supposed to be included in the Urban Forestry Management Plan. And I wanted to read those 4 items because while they're included, 3 of them are pre-development, and you really need to do them before you start developing houses. And as you know, the development moratorium is not going to apply to single-family homes anymore. So I wanted to read those and make sure that maybe we could get them under development regulations phase 2 because that is underway, and these things need to be codified. So looking at the City Council regular meeting packet from November 19th of 2019, they're under the category of ecosystem preservation and tree and vegetation retention. The 4 items were request 3A, preservation of pollinator and wildlife habitat, request 3B, protection of habitat and habitat corridors, request 4B is significant tree retention, and request 4C is replanting of native vegetation. So obviously replanting of native vegetation would be done at near the end of the project, but preservation of pollinator and wildlife habitat, protection of habitat and habitat corridors, and significant tree retention really need to be done up front so that we actually preserve those before they're wiped away. So I just wanted to bring that up as a reminder. That was on page 142 of 332 of that packet, and would like you guys to know about that, and for staff who's listening to give that a consideration. And finally, before I go, I can't see Larry's tie tonight, but they're always awesome. Larry is super personable. He is very friendly and supportive and really cares about people. And he's incredibly insightful. He can put into one sentence things that people like me take a long time to say, and I've just really appreciated that all the work that he's done, and I didn't know that they ever let you quit. So anyway, it's Larry, it's been great. And I remember when we were talking about community character, you said, well, back in the day, it used to be if you had a wood roof or if you went to an asphalt shingle roof, because that actually was the first change in character that happened architecturally. So I remember that and many other things you said and appreciate everything you've done over the years. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you for your comments, Mary. I'm going to go ahead and place you back on mute, and I will go ahead and unmute the second caller. Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Hey, good evening, Planning Commission. Paul Stickney here. And I hadn't intended on calling, but I'm happy I did. One, for the spirit of improvement and what's right, the phone number to call in tonight was not on the screen at the start of the meeting and only was up for a couple seconds during the second part of the meeting. So may want to find a way to get that screen up a little bit longer since it's not in the council packet. I got an email from a member of the public who plans to speak under the agenda topic and had asked for the phone number to call in. So that's how I got the phone number this evening. But everybody's talking about Larry Crandall, and I want to wish Larry all the best and just tell a little bit about how we first met. In the spring, I can't recall when, of 2014, Larry and I were 2 residents, along with David Hoffman, who was with the home builders at the time, and we were on one of 3 committees to interview the new community development director when Cameron, Garral left, and at the time they hired Jeff Thomas. And I remember being outside with Larry, and we learned that we were both heavily involved in forestry, having gone to University of Montana, Missoula, both he and I, not at the same time. but we were there. And I remember our conversations were about interesting anomalies in trees. We talked about deciduous conifers, such as a tamarack or larch and the Dawn redwood. And I think there was something else. You'll have to ask Larry. And then we talked about deciduous trees that stayed evergreen all year, such as what people call madrona or arbutus as the Latin name. Then over the years, we were council regulars for many years, many years, since 2014. Would always have a smile, always have a handshake, handing out jokes. And Larry also told me about an awesome book called The Shape of the Future that's really awesome. So anyway, Larry, appreciate knowing you, talking with you, seeing each other at council meetings, and look forward to, after this COVID issue is over with, however long that takes, then maybe we get together for coffee or a beverage now and then and shoot the breeze, because I've enjoyed knowing you, spending time with you, and having the opportunity to talk at council meetings. So all the best to you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. That was our last caller, so I will go ahead and hand it back to Chair Boffman.
Thanks, Jackie. So let's move on to our business for this evening. We have two old business items, and the first one is a continuation of the public hearing for the wireless communication facility code rewrite. And I didn't check first to make sure. Evan, were you going to do any kind of a quick introduction of where we are, or no?
I think the plan is just to pick up right where we left off with public hearing and continuing the public hearing.
Okay, so I will just remind everybody that we had started in on the public hearing on this topic and had a few comments, and ran out of time, and also had a few things to take a look at. So we decided to continue the public hearing to this meeting. And so the public hearing continues to be open. Do we have anybody who's making public comments regarding the wireless communication facility code rewrite as part of the continuation of the public hearing?
Thanks, Chair Boffman. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation one more time to give people time to call in if they want to call in for the public hearing. And I apologize, this slide says agenda public comment. It should say public hearing comment. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-25, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual Planning Commission meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public, and public comment can be submitted. For up to 7 minutes of verbal public comment may be provided per person live during the meeting. In order to provide verbal public comment, you must call in. Please call the following number and input the access code when prompted. The phone number is 1-872-240-3311, and the access code is 699-839-229. Once you have joined, you'll be placed on mute, and the meeting operator will unmute you when it is your turn to comment. And I believe we do have two callers who are ready to give their comment. I'll go ahead and unmute the first caller. Go ahead and begin your public comment, your agenda, your public hearing comment whenever you're ready.
Hi, this is Mary Wichter. I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish, Washington for the past 20 years. And I do have a short slide presentation. If you could put that up, it's the second PowerPoint I sent. It's just 3 slides. So this last year, we've actually had an osprey that's been sitting in the top of one of our very tall conifer trees by where I live. My neighbors have noticed it, and it's extremely cool. And then Jan Bird, who's one of our super stewards, when I'd met her about some wildlife maps by the Pine Lake Park and Ride by QFC on the plateau, she said, hey, yeah, there used to be osprey on the top of that tower over there. And she said the nest is gone now. So this is 2 summers ago, July 27th. And the 2 with spots, I believe, are the juvenile who are growing up and one of the adults there. And then if you can go to the next slide, please. Then when I met with Jan in December, she had noticed that the cell tower no longer had the nest on it. And I was sort of moved by that because I thought, should you really be able to take them down? And apparently you're not supposed to be able to take them down. There's a federal law if they've got eggs in them or if they're active. But when they're not active, you can remove them, and I don't even think you need a permit. So I had originally sent this in thinking it was going to be Development Regs Phase 2 or Urban Forestry Management Plan. But as I read through the cell wireless topics, there are quite a number of things that limit the height of a tower to 50 feet or some other feet or 10% more or 10 feet more. And what I learned about ospreys, they really like to be up on top where they can see things. They're higher up. Eagles like to have like some tree above them or whatever, and they do like to have the highest thing. And there are instances where towers have been extended quite a bit so that the birds can be on top of whatever the functioning is, and that's safe. It's also where they do an alternate one. So I would like at least the height portion, maybe there could be one exemption added that says for wildlife or rafter needs that a pole could exceed any of the heights listed based on like U.S. and Wildlife Best Guidelines or something or other. Also, I'd like the city that if somebody is removing a nest, that at least the city would learn about it. Maybe they could reserve that material so that another tower could be built. And then in one of the online things, someone had been flying a drone around the birds just thinking it was cool, and I think that the public should not be able to fly drones in the areas of this or other types of wildlife. So those are suggestions I am making for the public hearing for the wireless, and I wanted to thank you. And if you could go to the final slide, or the next slide. I told you about that tree that the osprey is sitting on our house, and just the other day, like 2 days ago, one of my neighbors actually took a photo of it. This is a photo, and then the zoom of the photo, you can see there on the right, that's actually a bobcat or a lynx that climbed all the way up this 150 foot tall tree, and the crow was picking on him. So in the Marymore pictures that I'd shown to City Council, whenever you do a tower or a pole, you want to put, it's a 3 or 4 foot smooth sleeve around the pole so that the predators can't get at the birds. So those are things I've learned. I hope that you care enough that you might make some of the changes in the code, the wireless code. I know it's been around a few times, but you can make recommendations before it goes to City Council. And I also do appreciate all the work that Josh Amato did reviewing, and hopefully those updates been made. So thanks to staff, thanks to the people working on this, and we're just trying to inform you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mary. That's also a really cool photo, so thank you for sharing that. We do have one more caller on the line. I will go ahead and unmute you, and you will have 7 minutes to begin your comment whenever you're ready.
Good evening. This is Greg Bush with Wireless Policy Group, commenting on behalf of AT&T. I'd just like to be brief. I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for the additional consideration that they've given to Commissioner Amato's comments. We appreciate that there's even more attention to detail being paid to the code changes, and we really appreciate all of the effort that's gone into the code, both on staff side as well as the Planning Commission side. I have just one last suggested change. If you're willing to take a look at it one more time, page 70 of tonight's packet, Section 4, in between 1 and 2, in order to go along with Commissioner Amato's comments about technical infeasibility and to line up with what staff mentioned that they might consider for the reality of figuring out where to place a macro site, we recommend placing an or in between items 1 and 2 of Section 4 on page 70 of the packet, which is if it's technically infeasible to locate on a particular piece of property or communicate with the landlord, then it would make more sense to put it in the code that's just place an or in between the two items. That way, it allows the applicant to come in with evidence up front and have justification in the code saying, yes, this is technically infeasible to go on this particular piece of property, and here's why. And it gives staff the ability to look in the code and say, yes, this is allowed under the code. So thank you again, and thanks for all of the attention.
Thank you very much for your comments. I believe that was our last caller, so I will go ahead and hand it back to Chair Boffman.
Thanks, Jackie. So with that, we'll close the public hearing on this Wireless Communication Facilities Code rewrite. And if someone would like to make a motion and a second so that we can have some discussion about it, that would be helpful.
I move to recommend that the City Council amend the SMC related to wireless communications facilities, including the repealing of Chapter 21A.55 SMC and adopt new Chapter 21A.56 SMC as drafted in Exhibit 1 and further amended by the Planning Commission as described in Exhibit 5 of the January 21st, 2021 packet materials.
I second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we recommend to the City Council on this topic. Who has some discussion? Who would like to start? How about, I assume, Josh, you have some things, so yeah.
Yeah, what I looked on page 70 of the packet and I could not find the section, so I'm hoping we can stop on that for a second and maybe get David Powell's opinion of that change so that we can get some more context around it.
Admittedly, I am looking myself, so bear with me.
So it might be page 71, item 4.
Okay, I found it, and I'm going to ask Jackie if I'm allowed to share my screen.
Sure, just 1 second. Let me give you control.
Thank you.
I think you should be able to do it now.
Yeah, just a sec here. So I am attempting to share my screen, and with that, I should be able to toggle between the different documents. So what I have up now should be the draft. Are you seeing the draft?
Yes.
Okay, so the section I believe that was being referenced is here. Specifically, the owner of the residential property upon which the small wireless facility will be located has granted permission in writing to locate the facility in the desired location, or, and it would be changing this and to or, has provided proof of authority to grant such permission. I think that's a perfectly appropriate change. It just clarifies that there's either granted permission in writing or some other proof of authority to grant such permission.
I'm not sure that I read it that way. Can I just ask you to look at that again? Because I believe that what the language, at least right here, says, I'm not sure if this is what Greg was intending me to point to, but it says that the owner has granted permission in writing and has provided proof of the authority to grant that permission.
Meaning that's an or. Or, so I guess I'm trying to figure out where Greg was talking about.
Yeah, I don't think that's it.
David, this is Evan. I could reach out to Greg separately and ask for clarification.
That would be helpful. I'd like to be able to see where exactly that proposed minor word change is located.
Okay, and while we wait on that one, I sent a potential change to Mark and Ratuja earlier today, and David and some other staff members related to the issue Mary Wichter has brought up. So I don't know if anyone at the staff level has had a chance to look at that yet and is able to provide any sort of educated commentary on it, because again, I know it was late getting to you, just being sent this afternoon. My goal with this change, and I don't know if it can be brought up on screen, I only sent it to the chair and vice chair because I didn't want to have any violations of the Open Public Meeting Act. But my goal with this is, right now, in order to remove an active bird nest from a location, you have to get a permit from the federal government. If the bird nest is inactive, you can remove it at your discretion, essentially. The challenge is that these birds come back to these locations repeatedly, and then they re-nest there, and so they continue to cause problems, and not really the best way to treat our birds, keep coming back to our area. So what I did was wrote some language to require that if a federal permit is obtained, that after that they notify the city that has happened. So any concerned citizen who sees a removal taking place and they call the city will have the information about it and can let them know that that is permitted. The other one was during an inactive nest period, the network provider will put a platform in place or something in place to when they're moving the nest, for the nest to be at instead. So if it's on a cell tower, perhaps they build a platform that goes up a little bit higher and provide a location for them to remake the nest. This is the same essential requirements that are there if they get a permit from the federal government. This would just make it a requirement during non-active nest periods. And the reason why I think it's a little important is because they will come back to use the nest anyway. So this is the language I wrote up this afternoon. A lot of it is borrowed from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife pamphlet that Mary had sent as far as the requirements go for the replacement structure. So I'll give a moment to have David or anyone else comment on that and ask some questions.
So thank you, first of all, for putting together this string of code, and I definitely like the use of, the notation on the column. It allows, I think it's something that we should start doing as staff, so I appreciate the formatting as well. The whole question around nesting and wildlife, I think the first thing is, where do you as a regulatory agency set the standard and draw the line? We already have within our code what is called the Fish and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Area, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a 1 acre parcel of land. A Fish and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Area can be a feature that is used by a threatened, endangered, or otherwise listed species recognized by the federal government or by the state. In my experience, that has applied to towers. I've seen lighting features at stadiums in other cities where I've worked fit into that category, where they were required to, before redoing the lighting at the stadium, first put up a new replacement pole and move those remnant pieces of the nest to that new nesting pole. And that also was compliant with the federal standards that they had to meet. So I think the question is, first is, where are these rules best placed? Because it may not just apply to a wireless facility. It might apply to a PSC power pole. It might apply to a Lake Washington School District stadium lighting pole. It might apply to a roof structure, a sign, a billboard. Any one of these categories could end up being used as a habitat feature, an urban habitat feature by one of these species. So my first take is that although I understand where you're going with it, I think it's better suited, located in a different section of our code. We already have the general framework for fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas by definition and by standard. They do refer back to federal listing and state listing, and they do refer back to state management recommendations for species. So I would suggest that framework's already in place. Second, we don't necessarily want to be in the position of overseeing an applicant's ability to obtain a permit from the federal government and verifying that they have obtained that permit. That is an additional burden on staff. It takes staff time. And if we miss it, then we're often put in the spotlight by the community of kind of a gotcha of, oh, staff didn't do their job. They didn't make sure that that bird permit was obtained, and when we didn't even know, right? So it kind of puts staff in a very difficult position. The next is that this also adds a lot of time and wrangling between the city, the federal government, the state, the applicant, the utility owner. And we are in a world of ever collapsing timelines where the city could be put in a position of holding up a project because we have a code that is in conflict with shot clocks mandated by the FCC and apparently now an attempt by our state legislature to add additional 60-day shot clocks to certain actions. So there's that. Finally, the last piece of it is that there are, many articles and a lot of background, and I'm not an expert by any means on this, but what I do know regarding some of these higher power antennas that are typically located on macro facilities is that you really don't want to be around them. And in allowing birds to nest at the point where there is a high-powered antenna that is not something that a human would even go near without first turning off the power, gives me some alarm. So are we then promoting nesting near these types of facilities where nests really shouldn't be located? Is there a fundamental conflict between trying to provide some sort of urban habitat on a facility that's high power that is seen to have electromagnetic radio frequency radiation that would be somehow impactful to the bird species? I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know that it's necessarily the best place to promote or maintain bird habitat. So those are all my thoughts on that. I leave you with those. Do what you will with those. But that's in the time I've had, that's what I've come up with.
Okay. Well, I'm not. I don't know. So this is just a replacement of giving a platform replacement in the event a bird does nest in those areas. It would not be promoting them being there because they would likely come back to that spot anyway. My goal was also not to get in the way of federal permits or the city having to check that a permit is valid, just that the city's noticed that they're going to be doing some work on these and that they did get the permit. I understand that could put you in some odd situation if they didn't follow through and then you're getting yelled at, so I can appreciate that. I don't know that it would get in the way of the shot clock issue because this wouldn't stop anyone from putting up a facility. But I also completely believe, I agree with you that there's likely a better place in code for this to go because there are many other locations where birds will be nesting and where something like this would be needed, like PSC poles, and they've got their own process for doing that. But so I'm happy to drop this, but I just wanted to throw it out there and get the ball going because it is an issue that we received some comments on. So I'll leave it there and maybe we can bring it up another time when we're dealing with a more appropriate code location.
Can I ask? I mean, I think that the underlying intent of this is good. and, maybe putting it in with the wireless code is not the perfect alignment, but is there a way that we can take some kind of an action to make sure that there is some follow-up on this somewhere? And I don't, it feels like it's not super clear to me where it would fit in, and both in terms of the code, but also in terms of the work plan. And I hate to just say, well, it doesn't fit here, so we're not going to follow through and do anything with it. So I'd like to just ask if there's a way to at least keep track of it and make sure that we do revisit this at the right appropriate point in time in the right place.
Well, it's a great question. And I could see this fitting into a specific section of our code pretty readily. And if I could share my screen again, and while that's occurring, the method by which to add this would be to, as Mary was discussing earlier, add it to the docket. And any person may submit a docket request, whether it's Mary, whether it's a planning commissioner, whether it's a city council member, and then that gets evaluated and brought forward. We would hope that this would get docketed in advance of the critical areas update, because it allows us to get ahead of that. This sure would be nice to have something that we've worked out, and I think it's pretty well worked out. I really do appreciate all the effort that's gone into the code. I just would like to see it parked in the right place in the code so that it is most universal in its application, as we want to be appropriately managing our utility infrastructure and other urban features in the city. So I'm going to go ahead and share my second screen. Sometimes I get lost in all these different screens. So hopefully showing now is section of our code 21A15468. So this would be the first place that an amendment would take place, is that there would be a slight amendment to this section. This is the definition of fish and wildlife habitat conservation area. And we would want to be very clear to add a pole or other feature used by, and then we could add in there bird species covered under the Migratory Bird Act, right? Something like that. There's a way to add that here. So first of all, what you're doing is you're defining any feature that a bird has somehow associated with for the purpose of nesting is now something that's protected, right? Second, what you would do is you would, under this section, and hopefully you're seeing where I'm toggling over to here, there's a whole section on development standards for fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. And this section here would be where you would add standards regarding nesting features. And it'd be pretty easy to add that in, and adding that language that Josh provided, which could be tailored a little bit differently to be more broad in its application. But I hear what you're saying. So what you're looking for is, if someone wants to modify the structure or otherwise remove the nest from the structure or feature, then they would have to provide a surrogate structure or feature that is more attractive to the bird, the species, for use in future years. And there would be some requirement that remnant pieces of that feature or that nest be brought over in order to attract them. And I think this could also be broadened to also include other aerial wildlife features, like Mary Wichter included in her slide tonight. It's a really interesting issue. There's a white paper that we wrote in Bellevue many years ago. It's called it's a literature review on urban wildlife. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll forward it on to you guys. It's a really interesting read, and it talks about how to best manage wildlife in an urban setting. It includes bird and nesting features and whatnot. I think it'd be something that, just to brush up on, I'd like to reread it myself. So that's what I offer you, is that's the best place to put it. So.
If I may add, I think Mary Wichter pointed out two things. One was the nesting of the birds. The second one was deterring preys from climbing up. I think she showed a bobcat climbing up like 100 feet or so. I think we've talked enough about the nesting, and I agree that we need to add it in the right place in the code. How about, these poles, guarding, having some sort of a guard to prevent, even if there is no nest, what is going to prevent a bobcat from climbing up? And, as you rightly mentioned, there's high frequency, high voltage, whatnot equipment at the top, and short circuiting it, or putting itself in danger. So is that something that we need to bring this into the code as well for the wireless service?
And it may not just be for wildlife. It might also be for human interest. It sometimes a utility feature can be an attractive nuisance in an urban setting, and I've seen teenagers do some interesting things. So maybe there's a reason to put just a line in the code somewhere in the design standards that there shall be some form of climb protection or security, by design to preclude climbing by, I don't know what the right term is, by humans or wildlife. Unauthorized entry to the facility, something like that.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, the utility people might need to go up and fix something there. So they need to be able to go up there. So I think the unauthorized access probably sounds better than cutting off all entry points.
I hope they have cranes that take them over there. I don't know if there are 50-foot cranes, but I hope they are not like climbing up the pole like how the wildlife does, right? I think David.
I did the opposite. I've seen on 228 the use of cranes, but I've also seen them, shimmying up with their, belt attachment on. So.
Okay.
This is Kelly Hulsey, Deputy Director of Community Development. I will turn on my camera. I do want to point, I believe this is, and for some reason, my packet, the pages have all gone weird on me. Under towers, there is towers, I'm sorry, I have it on page 30 of 46 of the packet. C3, all towers, including alternative tower structures in the right-of-way, shall be enclosed by security fencing or wall at least 6 feet in height, and shall also be equipped with the appropriate anti-climbing device.
Are the wildlife going to obey this is the question.
That's a very good question.
You could broaden it to be an anti-climb or an anti-wildlife device.
So if we're still discussing the item I brought up, they call it a predator guard, and that's very broad. And I'm sure there's some packet somewhere on the Department of Fish and Wildlife that kind of outlines how you stop predators from going after the birds. I don't know exactly. I'm no expert on it, but that's what they call it.
If I could, I would just point out a couple things to include in this conversation. One is, in many, I think, instances, these poles are actually jointly owned or owned by somebody else. And so you can tell the wireless providers whatever you want, but if the pole is owned by PSE or somebody else, that really is the owner and the controller of that pole and what goes on it. And their standards are pretty inflexible typically. The other thing is, I think that most of this would only apply to wood poles, which we do have quite a few of in the city. I think most of the metal ones would be pretty anti-climb to begin with, so those are probably okay. So maybe the number of poles that we're really talking about here is not, that we'd be able to apply anything to. It'd have to be a tall wood pole, for the most part, that's owned and installed and maintained by the wireless provider. There's some of those, I'm sure, but maybe not as a general statement that many, because they're mostly utilizing utility poles for the tall stuff, or they're using the tall metal ones.
Larry here. was thinking about this, and birds are creative, but would some of this be eliminated if the top of the pole was designed in some fashion rather than a basket-like incentive for birds to build it there? In other words, a pyramid or something. I know birds are creative, and maybe you can't put wire mesh around, maybe you could put plastic mesh, but it seems like if we took away the opportunity, that we wouldn't have to be writing all this.
So you're suggesting the inverse, which would be to add a design requirement that new facilities be designed to discourage use of features, or work on existing. I don't know that we're going to be able to go back and require facility owners to retrofit them unless they're taking an action, kind of like we don't require a homeowner to go back and change their house unless they take an action that then triggers application of the code. I don't know if that helps address it going forward.
Yep. I would agree with that thought. I think if we can prevent, the birds from nesting on top of these poles, that will actually also deter the predators from climbing up. I mean, we are not going to safeguard these birds if they build something on top of a tree and a predator is going to go after them. So it's the bird's choice that they nested on top of this electric pole. So if we prevent that, then this entire discussion kind of, becomes simpler for us.
I would just add on taking away the ability for them to, not that I would want to encourage it, but they've lost a lot of habitat and locations to nest, and they're moving to these locations because they are prime spots for them. So I don't know the ramifications of doing that proactively. I know the feds require that if you were to add a mitigation measure on top of a pole when you're removing a nest, that you still must have a platform in place for them to move to instead. So I guess my concern with that would be, I don't know enough about it to know if I'm doing something bad.
Yeah. None of us know. We don't know birds. We don't know how they think.
Okay, so I'll just kind of bring it back here a little bit. So we're talking about the wireless code. We have a motion to send this to the city council. So if we want to make a change, we'd have to, somebody would have to, move to amend, or if there's other discussion, we can do that as well. Just want to try to keep us on track here with getting to a conclusion with this. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, so I like the idea of what you are putting together being docketed and ending up in the right place in the municipal code. I also like the idea of trying to move this along, the wireless code, so we can get 5G as soon as possible. I think Mary said that too in her email. One thing that we haven't addressed, and I think needs a little bit of conversation, in her email, she was talking about a height exemption for large birds of prey, and this was allowing greater than the 50-foot maximum. And so I kind of go both ways on this, but I think for me right now, if that would be a significant change to the code and cause any issues with the providers, then I'd probably not want to make the change with an expectation that there's lots of other poles and lots of other nesting areas around. But I did think that we hadn't discussed that point that she made. It was her first one, and we should, as a group, do that. And, so I went to Josh, since you've done a lot of research on this, that you happened to look at that particular item.
Yeah, at first with Mary's comment there, I was actually confused, but now that you've reframed it to, I think what Mary might be getting to is that if if a facility needs to be modified because they're removing a nest and they are required to get a permit and create that platform, they're recommended that you move it up higher. So if they're already at the max height with that pole, the additional platform would go above the max height that we allow in the code. So would that be exempt or not? It should be. I think it should be exempted if it would not already be permitted within the code. I don't know if the federal requirements would just, override us in that instance. So I think some professional insight into that would be good. I think Mary brings up a good point with that. And Mike, thanks for mentioning that because that slipped my mind entirely.
So if that is a federally or state prescribed habitat treatment, then we would allow it. We would not be considering the pole that is not, it's not a wireless facility, so it would not fall into the same category of height restriction. Just like currently we do not have height limits for transmission lines in the city. It's a specific type of infrastructure. So what I would say is that if there was a management prescription, that it be placed higher in order to keep the birds off of the existing wireless facility, which is an existing pole, that a new pole would have to be placed within a reasonable proximity and of a certain height higher to be more opportune and more appealing to the birds than the wireless tower that they've been using as a nesting feature. Does that make sense?
I think so. It sounds like we don't need to modify the code that we have in front of us in order for the wireless provider to go above the height limitations we've set for the facility. Is that correct?
That's my take on it, and the reason for that is that the pole that would be put in as a habitat feature is not a wireless facility.
Okay. Other discussion?
So let me understand this. So if you have a 50-foot tower from the ground, you have a bird's nest, and let's say it's an inactive bird's nest, and if the provider wants to remove it, are they expected to put another 55 or a 60-foot pole next to that? Is that what we are asking them to do?
That's my understanding. It would be within reasonable proximity, and it would be taller than the actual wireless facility so that it becomes more attractive and appealing to the bird, because as Mary stated in her presentation, the bird would tend to want to use the taller feature than the tower.
I just want to clarify that some of these can be attached to the wireless facility to take it up from that point. So it could be just directly attached and not an entirely separate pole.
Which one? Is it a separate pole or is it just a platform, or it could be both?
I imagine it's, I don't know for sure, but I believe it would entirely depend on the feasibility of that location on what they opt to do and whatever the federal process is for that. I really don't know. So take what I say with a grain of salt.
David, this is Brittany Port with AHBL. I'm not sure if I can kind of jump in here regarding the height. There would still be a process for a tower to exceed the height if it goes through a conditional use permit. So if there were a need for it and the technical analysis demonstrated that their height required them to be at the maximum, and then we also needed to apply the city's critical areas code to the tower to include some mitigation, which I think the city's critical areas code is pretty general in that regard. It relies on a qualified consultant to provide recommendations for mitigation. So if that, I think if in conjunction with a CUP to exceed the height, that could be achieved, and you would be able to provide that mitigation and also meet the provider's objectives.
I would agree with that permit path. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other discussion? Mike, I see you're unmuted, so I'm checking to make sure.
Those are good clarifications. I think address Mary's concerns in an appropriate way. So no further comments.
Anybody else? If not, then I'm going to call for a vote. So it's been moved and seconded that we recommend that the City Council amend SMC related to wireless communication facilities, including the repealing of Chapter 21.A.55 SMC and adopt a new Chapter 21.A.56 SMC as drafted in Exhibit 1 and further amended by Planning Commission as described in Exhibit 5 from the January 21st, this evening, 2021 packet. So let's go ahead and vote on that. If you could please unmute, raise your hand and say aye or similarly nay. Okay, so those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
I had a question. Were we waiting for Evan to get back to us on that other item? That or?
We have actually heard back from Greg Bush. I have an email that just came in, and I'd be happy to share that.
Why don't you go ahead, David?
Thank you. Just a sec here. I'm trying to figure out. I have 3 screens. I need to figure out which screen it's on. Let's see.
I thought we were done with wireless. Like literally it was going down the drain and now we yanked it back out again.
This is why we respect Larry so much.
So this is what I received with this word highlighted. Macro cell facilities that cannot be sited pursuant to subsection 2A must meet the following infeasibility criteria to the extent applicable. And I'm trying to find the section in the attached email, section IV, between 1 and 2. So if I go back to this here, section IV between 1 and 2.
Oh, he wants an R between 1 and 2. One of those two.
Or, got it. The network provider must provide the designated official with documentation that establishes that it contacted the owner of each existing wireless facility that currently houses, okay, or must provide with the documentation that it considered locations within those non-residential zones. So basically, what he's saying is that he doesn't want to have to contact all of the owners within 1,000 feet and verify that they said no, and he doesn't and also have to show that they considered them and that they're technically infeasible. What he's saying is that it could be one or the other, that they contacted all the facilities in 1,000 feet and they said no, which we then would verify, or they considered all the facilities within 1,000 feet and for technical reasons they are infeasible, which we would then verify. Is there any questions on that?
I have to admit I'm struggling to follow that. What is this section under? It's
So this, let me zoom out here. This is infeasibility, technical infeasibility. Page 25 of 46. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, it's right above 21A 56-120. It's not in that section. It's right above it. And on my PDF, it's page 74 of 110 from the packet.
See if I can stop sharing here. Here we go. Figure out if I can. Packet 74, you said?
On the PDF, if you've got a 110-page PDF, which should be the packet, on page 74.
I get confused because there are 2 page numbers here. There's a 25 of 46 and a 74 of...
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said if it's just a PDF, whatever program you're using for PDF, go to page 74 of the PDF.
Yeah, got it.
Got it. So it's 21A.56.110, item 2.
One can two
B IV. Little B IV.
Yep, 2B4, yep.
So review process, conditional use permit, and then this is 4.
Yep, and it would be adding an or between 1 and 2.
David, I remember I had asked that question essentially, like, are we asking them to do work that they know isn't going to be used anyway? And you had an answer that I don't remember what it was, but I had found it acceptable and moved on at our last meeting. And I don't remember what you had said about why to keep it that way.
Yeah, Josh, your question, I'm reading it as, what if they know it isn't feasible before they ask to co-locate? Are we asking them to do it anyway, even if they won't be following through because it won't work? So was that in your questions that they collected?
So that should be on the matrix that is down lower.
Yeah.
Or up higher. Excuse me, it's up higher. 56, 110. There it is. Typically, the process requires, so I'm in the, I'll share again if I can figure out how to, there we go. Share this screen, share. Here it is right here. So here it is. This is where the cursor is. Hopefully it's coming in now. And here's the question that Josh asks. Typically the process requires that applicant must first seek co-location within 1,000 feet. If they find co-location won't work, they provide the technical reasoning to the city. If the applicant already knows co-location doesn't work, the city would likely allow them to provide technical reasoning as opposed to first seeking co-location with other facilities. So I think the or would clarify that if the commission felt appropriate.
I personally think the change makes sense because if the intent is what they're asking us to do, then let's not get that lost years down the road when they're stuck doing the requesting for co-location when they don't need to.
is there a general consensus about this? Because we can take care of it pretty quickly.
Well, I think, David, the way you explained in the matrix in response to Josh's comments from last month is consistent with an or, just like Greg had mentioned. That was the meaning as you described it, is that this was written as an or rather than both.
I'd be fine with an or there.
Yeah.
So
I was looking at the or. Is there a way to move that before both of them to say somehow you can select between one, and if one doesn't work, you select number two, or vice versa? But it seems like that should be up in the top.
Must meet one of the following infeasibility criteria. We can change that word over there.
One of the following. Right here, must meet one of. So we would add the words right here where the cursor is. We would meet, I don't know if you can see this, but it would be, must meet one of the following infeasible criteria to the extent applicable. That would work as well.
That's very clean.
Okay, any more discussion about this? Okay, so I move that we further amend the wireless code that we've been reviewing under 21A.56.110, item 2B4, and add the words one of between meet and the second line of the heading number 4. Is that close enough for everybody?
Yep.
I second that motion.
All right. Any further discussion? So it's been moved and seconded to modify that section by adding the words one of as a further amendment to the code. All those in favor, again, aye, and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. All right, so that amendment passes. So now, let's go back. I'll check and make sure, is there any further discussion about the main motion as amended? Okay. So I'll try again, and I'm not gonna reread it because it's in the minutes and fully read already. So it's been moved and seconded that we move this to the City Council with the amended version with the comments included and the second amendment that we just passed to add those words into this section. And the references should all be there, okay? All those in favor of recommending this to the City Council, say aye.
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 All opposed, no. All right, so we are done and have recommended the wireless go to the City Council. Okay, I'm going to go get a drink, a much harder drink than the water that I'm drinking.
I haven't seen you smile so broadly, Mark.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Happy.
It's all because we had Larry here for this last meeting.
Thank you. I move we have a 3-minute, do we want to take a break or not?
Sure. Let's take a quick break. Let's make it 5 minutes. How's that?
Good.
Right.
Okay, right now, my computer says 7:49, so how about 7:54? Thank you. We'll be back. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Our next topic on the agenda for the evening is a discussion about the Urban Forest Management Plan and the implementation strategies. Evan, is that you?
That is correct. Let me get my screen shared. All right. All right, I think we're ready to dive in. Good evening and congratulations, Planning Commission, on the passage of beloved WCF. Now we will be shifting gears to the Urban Forest Management Plan and looking at the Strategic Implementation Plan. Tonight we'll be talking about the implementation plan and quickly doing a high-level review of the UFMP and how we got here, and look at how staff plan to implement the UFMP. Oops. There we go. So tonight we will start with a very quick review of the UFMP to refresh our memories on what the plan is and how we got here. Next, we'll dive into an overview of the strategic implementation plan and how it is intended to work. The UFMP, or Urban Forest Management Plan, is the city's policy guide for managing, enhancing, and growing trees in the city over the next 20 years. It is the first of its kind for the city and brings all urban forestry activities under one vision and set of policies. Staff, with the help of our consultant, Davie Resource Group, worked with community and staff stakeholders to develop a shared vision of the urban forest and foster a sense of collaboration between the city and its residents to support the UFMP. Lastly, the plan sets goals and objectives for accomplishing the city's urban forest vision, which is the UFMP will serve as a guiding document for management of the urban forest in ways that balance our community responsibilities of environmental stewardship with the necessities of human endeavor. The UFMP's goals are set around three broad areas that work towards realizing the vision. Those areas are urban forest sustainability, which aims to improve the urban forest resource. Next, efficiency in municipal operations, which will drive improvements in city policy and practices and align the efforts of city departments around urban forestry work. And community collaboration and engagement, which will build stronger community engagement and participation in urban forest stewardship. As you may remember, staff started working on developing the UFMP in 2018. Early on, there was a focus on creating an inventory of the city's tree resources, research and analysis, and engaging the community. All of that work led to setting goals and objectives. In the fall of 2019, the City Council approved by resolution the adoption of the UFMP into the city's environment element of the comprehensive plan and directed staff to begin work on the next phase of the process, implementation and performance measures. This phase is where the rubber meets the road. We will use the tools developed as part of the strategic implementation plan to put the goals and objectives of the UFMP into action. So, what is the strategic implementation plan, or SIP? As I stated a moment ago, the SIP is a set of tools that will allow the city to make the goals and objectives of the UFMP actionable. It does this by creating a framework to guide urban forestry work within the city by utilizing three tools. The first is the implementation matrix. That is used to create biannual staff work plans, whose progress is tracked and reported on in the annual State of the Urban Forest Report. The implementation strategies matrix is a comprehensive list of all of the proposed implementation actions, which have been sorted under the appropriate goals and objectives. The matrix was developed by collecting implementation actions suggested by the Planning Commission, City Council, and the public during the development of the UFMP and the annual docket process. Additionally, Davie Resource Group conducted extensive interviews with city staff and recommended a list of actions to be included. I wanted to take a moment to familiarize everyone with the implementation strategies matrix to help you navigate it during your review of implementation actions. Goals are listed at the top of each section. In this case, goal UA1, maintain overall canopy cover. Below each goals are its objectives. Here we are able to see objective A, develop and adopt an overall canopy goal, and B, enhance canopy in key areas. To the right of each objective are the proposed implementation actions. You'll notice these actions are the concrete steps staff can take to help produce the objective's intended outcomes. Before we move forward, it's important to note that the goals and objectives are set in stone as they have already been adopted into the comp plan. That said, we have full latitude to add, amend, or remove implementation actions, and these actions are where we should focus our attention. To help understand how the implementation strategies matrix is meant to work, I think a simple graphic can help. The matrix is meant to be a living document which will act as a repository for implementation actions. As we move forward and more ideas come along, they will go into the bucket. These actions are what go into developing future staff work plans, which I will discuss next. Before I move to the work plans, there's one last important thing I need to cover relating to implementation actions. Staff recognize and appreciate the expertise we have in our community around this topic, and we want to make sure we're not missing out on any potential implementation actions. To ensure this, we've created a Connect Sammamish page, which will be live tomorrow morning. On that page, you will find the implementation strategies matrix, along with other project resources. You'll also see this green button. This will lead you to a jot form we have developed to collect proposed implementation actions. Over the coming weeks, we hope that the Planning Commission and public will thoroughly review the implementation strategies matrix, keeping an eye out for any that we may have missed. Should you find there are missing actions, you can use this jot form to submit a proposed item. It's important to note that for any new proposed actions to be considered for the 2021-2022 work plan, they need to be submitted prior to the March 4th Planning Commission meeting. Now onto the work plans. The biennial work plans will be staff's guide to urban forestry work each year. The plans will be developed to align with the biannual budget cycle and will be constructed using implementation actions from the matrix. The work plan parameters will be established based on the adopted urban forestry budget, staff capacity, and the policy goals of the City Council. This is a sample of the draft work plan template. Each action of the work plan will define, each section of the work plan will define its time frame, in this case, Q1 of 2021. It will also describe the work plan focus for the time frame, then list the goals, objectives, and implementation actions, which are pulled from the implementation strategies matrix. As you can see, the work plans create a detailed guide for staff to follow to accomplish urban forestry work. The third tool of the strategic implementation plan is the State of the Urban Forest Report. The report will be developed and delivered annually and will account for the work plan progress that has been completed that year. The report will use performance measures and metrics to track work plan progress and will allow the Planning Commission and City Council to assess work plan progress and use that information to adjust the coming year's work plan if necessary. This slide gives you a sense of how, year over year, the work plans, in conjunction with the State of the Urban Forest Report, will continually evolve based on progress made in the year prior. For example, at the end of 2021, staff will present the report, and based on the metrics and progress outlined, the 2022 work plan could be amended should the need arise. As we move forward, we want to help guide the Planning Commission in the key roles we hope you will play in reviewing the SIP. First, we hope the Commission and the public will thoroughly review the implementation strategies matrix. Again, we want to make sure the list of actions in the matrix is comprehensive, and should you find there are missing actions, to use the jot form on the Connect Sammamish page to make recommendations. During the March 4th meeting, we will review any newly proposed implementation actions and begin review of the proposed 21-22 work plan. Between now and the March 4th meeting, staff will be inviting the planning commissioners to 2s and 3s meetings so we can work closely with you in reviewing the matrix, answering questions, and to begin develop and review the 2021-2022 work plan. Looking forward, we have our next meeting on this topic on March 4th, where, like I said, we will review the implementation strategies matrix and present the 21-22 work plan. On April 15th, we will hold a public hearing where we will ask the Planning Commission to recommend the work plan and implementation strategies matrix to the City Council. This summer, we will bring these items before the City Council and seek approval of the work plan so staff can begin implementing the 21-22 work plan. So that's it for the presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. So does anyone have questions about this?
Larry here. The questions, there was lots of things in there that I was very pleased to see. One was, and I'll just rattle them off because there was a lot to read. There was concern for safety of people working on trees. I thought that was great. And then there was the use of resalvaging or reuse of trees, wood chippings and things like that. There was lots of other things, but the only thing I found missing, and now I have to go back to my notes, was under the salvaging trees, I didn't see anything that said or referenced where you take a dead tree that's been chopped down someplace and you pick it up and you plant it in a mitigated area in a new development. So you're bringing in that old dead tree for habitat to come in and other things. And it actually looks kind of interesting. It almost looks like a park, a statue in a park. There's one, I believe, over in the Middle Leaf, Jarvis Connor area, and I hope, I'm looking at Kelly. Kelly, what is the technical word for what I'm describing?
A nurse log is what it is. So it's a tree that's fallen that you transplant in a natural environment, and usually we see regrowth of moss and sometimes trees coming out of a nurse log. Evans Creek Preserve has a lot of good examples of that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And my last point, I had to look at the notes because it's so late in the night here. There was way back in the 16s or 2016, 17, or 18, there was some concern about the city getting a nursery, a place for the plant stewards to bring and put stuff, plants, and that is included in there, at least referenced. So great, good job, that's all. Nurse hog, okay. No.
That would be a nurse log, and Larry, that would be something to consider for community goal C6. And we have a lot about wood chip sites. I think we could probably expand that implementation strategy somewhere under C6.
Thanks.
Josh?
So a couple comments came in, and I want to bring up a couple of the items. And I've heard this one a lot, particularly when we were doing this back in 2019, the arborist business license. One, is there a mechanism in place now to know that a business operating in Sammamish is an arborist already? So is that a duplicative requirement, for one? If it isn't, I believe that Sammamish uses the state's unified business license system. So I don't know how much leeway we have in creating separate requirements. So my question is there a way that we can determine that a business operating in Sammamish is an arborist? And then on that front, can we list licensed businesses that are arborists in Sammamish? Because I see all the time people on Facebook asking, who do I call? Who can do the work? And my concern is that, and this kind of goes into another question, if we make it too arduous for people to follow the law, they're not going to. And we don't have an army of staff members to go and make sure that people are. So we need to make it as easy as possible for people who want to do the right thing to do the right thing. So I would like to know what that might look like. And you don't have to have an answer now. So.
But I do have an answer. It's right here. So under Community Goal C5, establish an arborist business license, we do have 3 draft implementation strategies, and you're right. This would be a query and report on the state of Washington business license to see how many of those are here in Sammamish, and then develop a list of known arborists working in Sammamish. And I'll look to David. That is something we could definitely publish. We just want to be careful that fine line of this is the list. It's not a recommendation. It's just these are the folks who are licensed as arborists. And the third implementation action drafted here is petition state of Washington to add arboriculture as a business activity. And as I say that, I probably would need Davey to come and speak to that a little bit more. But if we wanted to elaborate on some of those, we could definitely do that. So for reference, it is Community Goal C5.
Okay. And Forterra has been mentioned many times, and I looked at their website, and I've, Hazel, I can't remember the name of it now off the top of my head, but I've walked through that. It looks like it's nicely managed. So I'm curious, and this doesn't have to be answered now, but I'm curious what that partnership might look like. I'm assuming it costs us money, so I would like to have an understanding of what that might mean for the city if we were to make a recommendation that we go that route, and some pluses or minuses, because all I've heard is we should explore this, but I don't know why we might not explore it. And then I just want to, the streamlining of the permit removal process. I just put in a building permit and I downloaded SketchUp and created a site plan, and probably didn't need to do that. I found out I could have probably just called the city and drawn something out, kind of rudimentary, and I didn't know that. And I'm sure a lot of people don't know that they could probably do that for their trees. And I've seen conversations on Facebook about that. So I would hope that we could put together some ways to make it easier for the public to know the process. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Josh.
Can I comment on UA3? Specifically UA3E, create incentives for new development projects to retain native trees and increase forest buffers. That's, that seems to be good. I'm not sure if, why can't we have a rule rather than creating an incentive? That's one question I have. And then the subsection 1 of that is create a list of the native tree for developers to reference. I think we should also have native shrubs and other plants as well. So that would be something I would recommend. It's not just the trees. So I'm also curious, why is it an incentive rather than, being a rule?
So I would need to go back. So that was actually an adopted objective as part of the UFMP. So we don't have flexibility to change that, but I need to go back and review notes on why we determined that to be an incentive and not a development regulation. So we will need to follow up with you on that one.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Also, can you add shrubs and other
Absolutely.
stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I know Mike's got some cool comments to give.
I've got a question or two about basically the process. So Evan, I thought I heard you say that you were going to be scheduling 2-on-3 conversations with the commissioners. Did I hear you correctly? And if so, what's the time frame for that?
Yeah, that's correct, Mike. We will be looking to schedule 2s and 3s with you. And I think we're looking not this coming week, but the first week in February to start scheduling those meetings. That will give us plenty of time before the March 4th meeting to kind of digest what comes out of those meetings and integrate it appropriately.
Okay, that partly answered another question, which was about being able to provide additional comments and questions and having discussion around that. So, and then the other thing in terms of that matrix, it included priority and time frame and investments. And I know that, in the packet it talked about reviewing those in March 4th. Will we have an opportunity to look at that much before and provide comments, and perhaps in those 2-on-3 meetings? Like, are you looking for us for maybe some of the ideas around prioritization?
Kelly, maybe you can speak to that. I'll take a quick stab at it first. I know staff and Davie Resources sort of guided us very early with ideas towards the 21-22 work plan, which will be really building a foundation for future years of work. There are some steps that staff would just need to take to build sort of the infrastructure to have this work continue on into the future. So those have sort of taken early priority in the draft work plan that we have so far, but those the priority items, looking at the other sort of qualifiers is something that we can definitely discuss with you during those meetings. And Kelly, if you have anything to add to that.
No, that's exactly it. Going in. Okay, good. My mic is on. Sorry. Yeah, and this is why we want to do the 2s and 3s with Planning Commission, as well as receive public input on these implementation strategies early, so that we can get that list and start showing what that investment is going to look like, if there is a grant opportunity, there's partnership opportunities. But Evan is correct. City Council, as part of the 2-year budget cycle, just approved $150,000 for urban forestry implementation strategies, $120,000 in 21, and the other $30,000 in 22. So we do have a budget to work with. We did not get any new staffing, so this is work that would have to occur with our current staff. So when we look at what we're going to be doing for 21 and 22, we know the fence posts that we're going to be working within, and that we really, it's just imperative that we start setting the foundation to be successful in establishing an urban forestry program and moving this forward so that we can continue to build on it and report on our progress to City Council and to the community as part of that State of the Union, so we can say, hey, these are the things we identified for the next 2 years. This is what we accomplished, and here's the next recommended list of implementation strategies for the next budget cycle. So that's the process.
Yeah. And so actually, one of the things when I was reading through this was thinking about sequencing, because there was a lot there. So if there has been any conversation about that or recommendations that Davie's made, and if you could send that over to us so we can, kind of factor that into some of our thinking, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, we want to make sure it's we have a balance between all 3 goals, so that what we suggest moving forward to the City Council touches on those 3 goals, and we can definitely send over some of that information, so that you guys can to kind of help foster that conversation and discussion around implementation strategies.
Good. Thank you.
Anyone else with comments?
I'm just excited that that is back on our to-do list, and really, really sorry that Larry won't be able to participate in this, because I think he had really good insight and has first-hand knowledge. So Larry, don't be surprised if you get a call from some of us just for your feedback and input. The other general comment that I just wanted to make is, just the importance of public comment. And just today's meeting, I think there were such high quality public comments that were made that enriched our discussion. So thank you, Mary and Paul, for having a public comment, but then also encouraging others to send in the comments or come to these commission meetings and let us know what you're thinking. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, maybe I would just add to that kind of a process comment is that I think that there's a lot of interest in the urban forest management plan. And so as we plan our meetings and our process for going through some of this, we should anticipate maybe more public comment than normal. And some of that may be written, which is not necessarily a time issue other than us reviewing it, but we may get more verbal public comment as well, and we probably need to plan for that. So just something to think about. All right, anyone else? Hey, Commissioner Crandall, we're going to do public comment, and I'm not sure we have enough time left this evening.
I move that the meeting be extended to (8:54 p.m.).
Is there a second? All right, I'll second it. All those in favor of extending the meeting to 8:54, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Thank you, Commissioner Crandall. That's one for the records right there. Okay.
With the chair's tolerance, I would mention that we're really had till 8:30 before we had to do this. Just
yeah, but I didn't want to miss it. Okay, so Jackie, let's move on to public comment, agenda-related public comment.
Thank you, Chair Bachman. We do have 2 callers already on the line. I'll just read the phone number real quick. If you'd like to provide up to 7 minutes of verbal public comment, please call in. The phone number is 1-872-240-3311, and the access code is 699-839-229. I will go ahead and unmute our first caller. You will have 7 minutes. Please state your name for the record. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Mary Wichter, and I just have brief things to say. Urban Forestry Management Plan is really awesome. We've been waiting for it for a long time. I think it started in 2015, and prior councils were just kind of throwing everything into it. So I'm really glad for all the work that we've had. With regard to what Ratuja Indipuri commissioner said, and also Larry Crandall, anybody can give input, like people that tried out for the commissions and did not make it, people that have been past council, past commissions, just anybody can. I think people even from outside the city is welcome too. It really would be great if we had a list of arborists or people that are known. I know Sammamish Plateau Water, if you want to do something with your septic or sewer, they won't refer you to somebody, but they have an entire list of qualified people that have either registered or somehow with them, and I don't see any problem with the city doing that. And what's really hard is when people have a tree to go down or something that they want to do, they just call anybody and they don't really look to see who's arborist. So I think that's super important, and I think we need a lot more education up front for people. I don't know if there could be a page like that goes with the arborist list, so people would have basic training, because a lot of people either haven't dealt with trees before or haven't lived somewhere that the trees are so large. So I think what you want is you want feedback from people. The objectives, excuse me, on the left cannot be changed, but the implementation actions can. So if people write in, I just presume you want them to go by numbers. So that's just quick for people to do, and you want those earlier than later for everything upcoming March 4th. And I don't see a lot of them that change code. If we do have things that are specific to the code, I don't know if you have a specific process for that. But anyway, we do need to get moving on it. We had asked, I think Jan Bird had asked that everything be fast-tracked for Urban Forestry Management Plan last year, and COVID happened, so we're kind of a year behind that, and it took years to get there. So thanks to everybody for all the work that's done on this. Thanks to the great presentations, staff, people, and all the commissions and council that review them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for calling in, Mary. We do have one more caller, it looks like. I will go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and begin your comment whenever you're ready.
Good
evening, Planning Commissioners. Paul Stickney here. Good topics in the implementation matrix. I was especially pleased at, well, there were a lot of them in there, really great, but I'd like to do a shout out for management of the wildfire and, defensible spaces. I think that's really important here, especially as the climate is sort of changing overall. The written comment I sent in tonight is both on point, but also to be a placeholder for the next time the urban forestry plan can be open for changes to whether it be policy, vision, goals, etc., whether it's an annual comp plan change or periodic change. So I'm not so I just want to say that up front before reading the comment. I recognize where the plan is, but I also feel the two things I'm going to talk about are really important for the long term of our city having a much stronger urban forestry plan. So there's two things I'd like to talk about in that regard, again, as sort of placeholders for changes to the plan at the appropriate time. One is the life cycle of trees, and number two is two sets of percentages of land use. First, about the life cycle of trees. Today at the City Council retreat, Kent Treen spoke about his home and how he's managing his trees. And he talked about his trees being 100 to 120 years old, which is cool. But then he said that he's planning to manage them to anticipate them getting close to 400 years old. Well, this is very identical to things that I've said over the years, is that I really felt it was important to have a part of the plan that dealt with the true life cycle of trees. And I think I mentioned this at the March 5th meeting as well for your guys' meeting. So the current agenda item tonight talks about focusing on a 20-year horizon. I totally agree with that. I understand this. It makes sense. But I think at the right time, it would be very wise to amend the plan to come up with a life cycle look, whether you call it 400 years. But specifically, I recommend that the plan at the appropriate time add a table that has the typical lifespan of common tree species, and then make appropriate changes to the plan and its implementation based on that. So simply, at the right time, add a long-term view to the short-term view. I think it would make the plan far stronger. Second topic is about two sets of percentages. One percentage is 95%, the other is 2%, 1%, and 2%. I strongly suggest developing a set of policies that apply to 95% of the city, which are for land zoned R1, R4, and R6. I recommend developing another set of policies that are not the same for 2%, 1%, and 2% of our city. These would be policies that total 5% of the city area, that apply roughly to 2% of the city for town center, 1% for the other three centers that exist, and then 2% of the land area in the city which has the zones R8, R12, R18, office, neighborhood business, and community business. So my recommendation is to, at the appropriate time, make alterations to the urban forestry plan vision, goals, policies, and implementations that would add for the life cycle of trees and for two distinctly different sets of policies based on the 95 and 5% land use categories. That's my comment. Have a nice evening.
Thank you for your comments, Paul. Looks like that was our last caller. Let me just double check here. Yep. So I will go ahead and hand it back to Chair Boffman.
All right. Thanks, Jackie. Mr. Crandall, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I had it written down, and Mr. Stickney's comment on the fire control, I believe it's M1C1, but what it's saying is the impact of trees on emergency access. And you're going to talk about this. You're going to hear from a lot of neighbors, well, the trees are too big and we're going to have to cut them down now before they fall in our house and everything. We do need to look at the other side, and that's public safety. And in this case, that's broadened to the impact for emergency entrance and exit. So I'll leave it at that, let you folks work on it.
Yep, not my problem, right, Larry? Okay, last thing is, Kelly, or you want to look at the calendar at all? I was just looking here. I can just read what we have on here. So our next meeting on February 4th, we have some procedural and process things to take care of. We have a meeting scheduled for February 18th, which we don't have targeted the topic yet. And then March 4th, we'll be back on the Urban Forest Management Plan, as well as some Phase 2 development regulation updates. Anything else for the commission?
Nothing from staff. We're good.
Great. I saw Larry get up and leave. I thought maybe he was leaving early. All right, I think that's all we have. One last time, thank you to Commissioner Larry Crandall. It's been a real pleasure. If you'll notice that we're going to add 2 commissioners back here in our next meeting, so that's a 2-for-1 apparently. Takes 2 people to make up for what Larry was doing for us. So thanks, Larry.
You're welcome.
All right, could somebody move to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second. All right, all those in favor of adjourning this evening's meeting, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. See you in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.